Good afternoon. I'm with Simon Diakowski of Aztec Minerals, AZT, on the TSX Venture. Simon, how are you this morning?
Hey, I'm great, Robert. Thanks for having me on your show once again. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. It's a pleasure. I think this update was a little overdue. You've had a pretty steady stream of news flow since we last spoke a few months ago. This morning, more news on an expanded land package there in Tombstone, Arizona. But first, let's talk about the financing. So without, money, it's hard to get things done in this world and to do, drill programs. So let's talk about the financing that you just closed and what are the objectives, with those funds.
Yeah, no, great point. It's impossible really to do any work without money. So we had to take care of business on that front over the past couple of months. And so, coming off of our last drill program, which was quite successful, there was good interest in doing a financing. However, with the bit of volatility in the bigger markets, didn't come together, as quick as we had hoped. There was, obviously with the tariffs and obviously just volatility in the big board. March, April were tough months, but we were able to get something done on decent terms. So we raised 3.6 million Canadian dollars at 18 cents with a 3-year half warrant. And this was hold stock, so 4-month hold financing. And we were able to bring in a number of institutional investors in this round, some bigger players out of Europe, and maybe most notably Crescat Capital out of Denver came in. And so it's great to have them on board here as we start another round of drilling over the next few weeks.
So $3.6 million, but you're operating in Arizona, or at least that's where the bulk of these funds will probably be spent. So what does that get shareholders?
It gets us another drill program that we're currently in the final stages of designing, but I can talk about it a little bit here. Obviously, all of this is subject to change and board approval and everything, but we're looking to drill now about 5,000 meters. And the budget for that is about $1.6 million US. And it's actually a combination of RC and core this time. So we'll be drilling approximately 3,000 meters of RC with the same machine that we used in our last round of drilling in the fourth quarter of 2024. So we have good confidence in that crew and machine's ability to perform. In fact, the last time we used that same crew and machine, we were so happy with their performance, we were able to increase our drill budget from 2,000 meters to 3,000 meters because it was coming in under what we had allotted dollar-wise. So 3,000 meters of RC with the same machine. And then as part of the same program, but with a different rig, we're going to drill about 2,000 meters of core. And the core drilling is going to be an extension of 3 holes that are pre-collars. So these are RC holes that have casing left in them. So they'll be approximately 200 meters deep each on average. And then they'll be extended by approximately 600 to 600 plus meters each, depending on how they're going. So it's a 2-pronged approach here, and it'll help us now explore the vertical extent of the Tombstone property that we have, which has seen virtually no deeper drilling underneath the Contention pit, which is where we've been focused on the shallow, high-grade gold, silver, oxide opportunity.
So the CRD drilling is something that has been discussed for the last 3 years. I think you really kind of honed in on these targets sometime in 2022, and it's been sort of out there for Aztec, but this is the first time you have a concrete plan and you've decided we are going to drill these untested targets at depth. So tell us a little bit about that. You said 3 diamond drill holes going about 800 meters to test this Nacho limestone target at depth. So let's go into a little bit more detail about that. Why are you going to drill these targets? Why are you going to spend the money to test the, this deep target, and what's so compelling about it?
Yeah, no, that's it's been a little longer than 3 years that we've been thinking about it. It's probably been, for the company at least, it's been more like 7 or 8 years, to be quite frank with you. And the reason that we're excited about the target is because it's the similar geological setting to one of the more famous Arizona discoveries of the last few decades, which was Arizona mining in the what is now known as the Taylor deposit. So we're about 40 miles northeast of the Taylor deposit, and the Tombstone district shows some geologic similarities to the Hermosa district, which is where Taylor was discovered, the deep portion of the silver system there. So that's been of interest to Aztec management and directors since day one, since we optioned the property back in 2017-18. But it's taken a little bit of time to develop the targets, to get the money in place, and to figure out a way to drill the targets in a manner that is balanced between risk and reward. So what I mean by that is, these are deeper targets. They're not necessarily all that deep, to be quite frank with you, Robert. The targets over at Hermosa Taylor are almost double this depth. So the top of the Taylor deeps is about 1.1 km below the surface, and really the top of our targets is about 600 meters. So it's not crazy deep, but they are deeper than where we've been drilling. So I think it's fair to use that word. I don't want to scare off investors into thinking that these are, exceptionally, out there targets. They're actually quite shallow compared to a typical CRD target in that part of the world. That said, the Bisbee Group rock formation, where our gold silver, primarily vein system is hosted, is known to be very difficult to drill with core, and we know this from experience from a couple of years ago. It can be pretty difficult on the machines, and you can get relatively lower rates of production when you were down on site when we were drilling that first hole back in February of 2023, and it was not going very fast. There's a lot of faulting, fracturing, siltstone and sandstone and working, so it's not easy. And so the solution that we found is to come in and drill the top 200 meters of the formation, the Bisbee formation, with RC, which RC has, if you have the proper equipment, it's no problem. And then once we're safely into the limestone, or at the top of the limestone unit, then we can leave the casing down and re-enter the hole with the core rig, and then complete it in limestone, which drills very quickly and easily with core. So that's what we figured out through a little bit of trial and error. So we're now at the point where we think it's good idea to take a bit of a risk and to drill a little bit deeper into these CRD targets, because the prize here could be something much more significant than just an exciting gold silver oxide system that we already know we have. It would be an added dimension to the project. It would potentially bring in different strategic investors if we were to discover a larger base metal system of silver, lead, zinc plus. And aside from the regional geology, why do we like the target? There is actually one drill hole that was put in by a previous operator. This was back in 1989. A company called Santa Fe Mining came in, and they had a similar theory about Tombstone, about it hosting a potential deeper CRD and or porphyry system. But due to the history of the open pit mining at Tombstone, they were unable to drill deep anywhere near the pit, save for one hole to the north end of the Contention pit, closer to the town of Tombstone. That was hole T8. And we do have the logs for that and some of the results. And that hole actually did hit CRD mineralization around 650 meters down the hole. It hit 7 meters of almost 10% metal. That's 9.1% zinc, 0.6 copper, 0.6% copper rather, 32 grams of silver and a sniff of gold. And that was right underneath, as I mentioned, the north end of the pit. And it was never followed up on to the south of the pit, which is a little bit odd because the main south pit is where the highest intensity of gold silver mineralization was and is, but in our drilling, in the historic open pit mining in the 80s, and then way back at the genesis of this mining operation in the 1800s. That's where the 1,000 foot 10 level 4 compartment shaft underground mine operated. So it's just a bit of a situation where they were unable to access those claims, didn't want to, or weren't able to get an option on them. We don't know exactly, but they weren't drilled. And so now we're going to drill, at least 2 holes into that main pit area and go to depth where we also have a very strong geophysical signature that we think supports our theory. So that's why now's the time and why we're going for it.
Do you feel like Aztec has now done pretty much everything you can to put the probabilities, the odds, as much in your favor as you possibly can with these holes to test the CRD targets?
Well, we've done a lot. I think we've done a reasonable amount of work. We've done a good job, I think, of growing the gold silver system near surface initially. So that's provided, I think, a good base of value. We've drilled now almost 1 kilometer of strike and several hundred meters across of very consistently mineralized oxidized gold silver. And now I think with 70 odd shallow drill holes into the system, it's definitely time to see what was driving this and cooking it all up. And the risk with this kind of drilling is losing a hole and losing a lot of money. So that's what we've been afraid of. We've always liked the geologic target, but just the risk of losing a hole and losing, I don't know, $500,000 on something that could have been prevented is something that didn't quite sit right with us. So that I think we have now solved a method of getting into it. Now nothing's 100%, and I could be eating my words in a few months, but we think there's not a lot here that we're unprepared for the deeper drilling, and wish us luck that we don't lose a hole and that we can get to depth. But I think we've given ourselves a pretty good shot at doing so.
Yeah, this is one of the most compelling drill programs of 2025, in my opinion, across the whole junior mining sector. These holes, the shallow drilling is exciting by itself, as you're going to follow up some really high grade hits from 2024 and 2023. But the deeper holes to test this big, anomaly, essentially, that is not just an anomaly, as you pointed out. The drilling from Santa Fe in the late 80s prove there's metal down there, and some of the tenor is pretty impressive. So there's a lot of clues to follow up on, and I think with 3 well-placed holes here with the diamond drill, you can get a lot of information for an investment that is not excessive. And again, like you said, fingers crossed. Let's hope that the drill program goes reasonably well. But for me, as a shareholder, I'm super excited about this.
Yeah, no, look, that's I appreciate that, and it's great to have you on board. We're risking, just doing some quick math on my calculator here, but the deep drilling part of the program, it's about, let's say it's about 600,000 US of the program, so 850 Canadian off of our capitalization of, I don't know, 25 million bucks. So it's a I think it's a modest size risk that could have an outsized payoff. And I think we've talked about it before, but the key here is that if it's I don't want to get into any sort of hypotheticals, but let's do it anyway. If it's a technical success, it doesn't, I think, take away from what we've already found. Like Tombstone's such an interesting place and district. A lot of well-known geologists love it, right? It's very complex geology. Everything's all messed up, and it's got this awesome mining history. So if we can really add some knowledge to it, that would be super cool. And yeah, I mean, $850,000 of our financing to do so, I think, is a reasonable bet.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, this is a question that needs to be answered. And I mean, I thought it was 3 or 4 years, but you said 7 or 8. Yeah, it's a question that's been lingering for many years, and it's time to at least get some answers to the question: what is that big, MT anomaly at depth there, and is there more of that CRD type of metal like we saw in Santa Fe hole T8, which was 7.2 meters of I guess 9% lead zinc and 0.61% copper at 32 grams per ton silver. So a classic CRD drill hole there from Santa Fe. Would you say that if you get an intercept that matches that, like let's say one of the holes gets 7 to 10 meters of 10% lead zinc, would you consider that to be a very positive outcome?
I can't answer that. I mean, we just got to see what's down there. How to put into context what's positive or not at this point. I don't want to sort of put a number or a width to that. We're probably going to run some downhole geophysics as well. So I mean, I think it really just depends on the information that comes out of these drill holes. I mean, obviously, it'd be great if we hit, some wide intersection of massive sulfide on the first hole. That would be successful, obviously. But what's the quantum there? I don't know. I don't want to really comment on that yet until we see what we see.
So you will. So it won't just be the 3 holes that you're drilling there. It's going to be some downhole. Is it the borehole? Magnetics, or is there some other survey that should be doing there in those 3 holes?
Yeah, likely the EM, possibly IP. We're still kind of working through that, but we will have an opportunity to do so. To do some geophysics downhole, which I think could be worthwhile. So, I think the main point is we're drilling them. I think they're very well placed. There's 1 hole to the north, and then 1 hole in the center, and then 1 hole in the south. So we're going to be covering a lot of ground with the deep drilling. And then we're also going to be drilling, I think, interesting holes near surface. All of them step outs, actually. And, some of them will go beyond 200 meters depth with the RC. So it'll be very interesting, the entire program. We look at it as one program. So it's not just shallow versus deep. I mean, it's obviously just one mineralized system. So it's one drill program and like you say, let's figure out what's going on down there.
Okay. So the shallow drilling, you said it's all going to be step out drilling. So the west side area was a major focus of the last program. So you're going to do further, investigation of the west side area?
Yep. Well, absolutely. And I think one of the real highlights of the last program was how we pushed the mineralization from the contention pit to the west to now the mineralization is sort of well outside of that contention pit proper area. So we're going to continue to push it to the west with probably a fence of drill holes going into the sort of where that runway is. Remember when we were walking around that flat area near the collar of hole TC 2301, the vertical hole that we did in 23. So if you can imagine going, a couple hundred meters more out to the west there and drilling a fence of holes and seeing what happens. And then the southern extension is one that really started to, it really just came up the priority order with hole 16 last year, which hit, I think, the highest grade silver intersection that we've seen at Tombstone, fairly shallow down the hole. So that one's what we call the southern extension now. And we've done some more geologic work down in that area. And we think that the mineralization extends, or possibly extends rather, to the south. So we're going to be collaring at least 2 holes beyond the furthest extent of our southern drilling, and then a couple of holes to the southeast. And then this is completely brand new in our thinking, but we've sampled some kicks of gold to the east. So Robert, the little hill that we drive around once we get from the when we get from the weigh scale around to the sort of the main ag operation, we're going to be drilling into that hill a couple holes as well. So I think there's a good potential here to grow it really in three out of four directions. And we'll see what kind of surprises lurk there.
Very interesting. So this morning you announced that you've expanded the land position at the Tombstone property. So basically you've expanded it by almost 50%. This was a little bit of a surprise to me. What prompted you to stake this ground, and what's it mean?
Yeah, well, we've been quietly acquiring ground in Tombstone since our initial acquisition of a 75% option of the property back in 17-18. And what's notable about Tombstone is that there is over about 1,000 acres, I think, of patented claims in and around the district. So we've picked up more than half of those now. But in the initial transaction, we had about 450 acres. So we've been slowly adding adjacent parcels. We picked up a couple in 2020, a couple in 21, one in 23. So as they come up for sale on good terms, we've been able to buy them. And so we expanded that approach a little further and investigated to see if there were any unpatented claims available on nearby BLM ground. And so we found that there were a number of open claims. And so we made a list and prioritized them down to the 31 that we thought were the most useful to us. And so we were able to stake and file those over the last couple of months. And we just got confirmation of the filing the other day and announced that today. So it increased our property footprint by about 47%. And these claims are either nearby or adjacent to our existing holdings, and some of them have very interesting mining history on them. There's mine dumps, some shafts. There's some work to be done there to figure out if there are valid exploration targets on them. But we certainly think there are, just in our initial examination of them before we went out and acquired them. So that was a good news story for us. Announced today, of course, and we will continue to look for opportunities to grow when it makes sense. But in terms of where we're exploring in this upcoming drill program, it really is on the core properties that we initially acquired. So that was a decision that was made many years ago, that the top geologic prospectivity resided on those claims. And that's why obviously they were the first priority to include in the initial option.
With what's been going on in the U.S. in 2025 and some of Trump 2.0's, executive orders on minerals and made in America, copper, et cetera, it's some of the executive orders have been pretty transformational in terms of what they're laying out, even though it's still early days. As a CEO of a company whose flagship asset is located in Arizona, what do you make of this new administration and their posture towards mining and minerals in the U.S., and how does it affect you in Arizona?
Well, I think it's very welcome news. I think I'm very encouraged with the headlines as it relates to permitting at Tombstone. It's probably more of a sentiment thing for us at this point, that it's we're in the U.S., in Arizona, we're in Cochise County, which is known to be quite mining friendly. So it's helping with investor interest, and then beyond that, perhaps with infrastructure in the surrounding area. If some of these bigger projects that are subject to federal permitting get underway, then that will be very good for mining in Cochise County. So yeah, I fully welcome the the very realistic and sound logic of the Trump administration as it relates to mining, and hopefully it sets the tone for other countries around the world, because it's these projects are very capital intensive, and mining is kind of notorious for being boom and bust, and that boom and bust being exacerbated by the political situation in the jurisdictions where the projects are. So it's interesting. I was at a lunch the other day with the BC. I'm in Vancouver, right, as you know, and I was at the BC Mining Industry Association annual address, and they made this point. The organization represents mines in BC, but they were sounding the alarm, saying, America is becoming very mining friendly, and money is going to start, or has started, and will continue to flow there. The capital investment really knows no borders. So I'm very encouraged that we're going to see more investment in Arizona, and we're well situated with a project that's kind of bordering now on advanced exploration to attract some of that capital. And if we have exploration success, that should accelerate the development of this property at Tombstone.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of challenges in the mining industry, and most people are aware of the challenges, whether it's permitting, environmentalists, or funding, cost of capital. In your mind, what do you feel is maybe the one or two things that governments can do to support the mining industry and make some of these projects actually happen, instead of just being stuck in a permitting or feasibility logjam?
Yeah, I mean, as it relates to us in Tombstone, I gotta be clear. We're only subject to state permitting at this point, and the state of Arizona's actually got pretty clear rules about permitting a mine. So we haven't, we're not actively permitting any sort of operations at Tombstone at this moment. But from our investigation of what the process would look like, it is quite reasonable. So I think maybe just more broadly, what the Trump administration is proposing for the federal permitted, like federal BLM land, to have clear and quick permitting timelines would be the most important thing, really, so that investors have some sort of visibility into what they're buying at a steep discount, when those future cash flows might begin to manifest. So yeah, permitting timelines are number one, and then I think in the States, one thing that's a little bit tricky is I don't know if they're going to change this, but when you're acquiring public land, there's really not like a central depository of information like in Canada, right? There's no way of spending money to keep your claims in good standing. You just pay the BLM. I think it's like over $300 per claim now every year. And I think that makes it a little bit difficult to make discoveries in the US, just because if you have, a couple hundred, 200-300 claims, which is, modest sized property, you're looking at, $100,000 a year of dilution just to keep your claims in good standing every year. And how much exploration can you really do in that short time frame? So I think that's one thing that maybe Canada does better, is you can do work in lieu of payments. And I believe that's the way it used to work in the US in the 90s, when they had an actual mining office. So I don't know if you have any connections with the Trump administration in Florida. Maybe that would be something you could mention to them, because it's a bit of a backwards system, and they don't have maps-based staking, like internet map-based staking. It's all, ATVs and dropping claim posts and making paper filings. It's pretty antiquated.
I kind of like that, though, Simon. I kind of like the fact that you have to go out there and nail the claim post into the ground yourself and do it the old-fashioned way. I think Canada got a little too far ahead of itself and made it too easy for guys to read a news release on a Tuesday morning and then stake a bunch of ground on their computer, at 11 a.m. I kind of like that, but I agree with you. There's no central database in the U.S. The data is very hard to come by. And obviously there's a few companies who have a lot more data than everybody else, like, Rio Tinto, because they acquired the, Kennecott company, and got all their data from 100 years of working around the U.S. So they have a big advantage over a lot of other players, in the U.S., because they have all that historical data. But yeah, it would make a lot more sense to have a central database managed by the government.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think what about the work in lieu, I think, is also pretty key, because you know, with more grassroots exploration, I mean, you just have to cover more ground. And there's, you can't, like,
Hmm.
Tombstone's very unique because the discovery was made, a century and a half ago. But if
Hmm.
you're up, and I see you wearing the Hercules Metals hat, right? But if you're up
Hmm.
in Idaho or Wyoming, or some wide open rangeland, you're going to be spending a lot of money every year to keep those claims. So to me, it just doesn't make any sense to utilize the BLM as like a small revenue center, where it's public land. So in theory, you're trying to encourage entrepreneurs to take a risk and to find something that could maybe be for the greater benefit of everybody and create, a lot of tax revenue. Let's say if you actually develop a real mine. So what's the point of making $300 a claim per year, and keep the administrators in the wherever office busy, versus, saying, look, okay, you spend 100 grand, you can apply this, kick the claims out for 2-3 years, and, really have a go at it. Because I mean, even especially when you have seasonality, right? How much work can you really do in a year?
Hmm.
So I think that's holding it back, to be honest with you. It's holding back discoveries, and you need discoveries to sustain the industry. And I think that's what they want, is they want more critical metals, but you have to find them, not just develop the existing projects.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. You should be able to do work in lieu of making an annual a payment to the BLM, to the federal government. If the federal government really wants to stimulate more discoveries and more mining and metals made in the U.S., then they need to do some stimulative things to take a little bit of the burden off the industry, because obviously early stage exploration is super high risk. People are putting out hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of risk capital with absolutely no certainty of a positive outcome. All that money can just go into the ground and go to money heaven, as we see quite often in this industry. Um, let's just touch on a couple more things, and then we'll wrap this up, Simon. So you have another property called Cervantes in Mexico. What's happening at Cervantes, and roughly, what news flow, what timing of news flow can shareholders expect from Aztec over the next few months?
Well, we are designing a work program for Cervantes. We'll have news on that over the next couple of weeks. We haven't done much work there since a drill program that was completed in Q4 of 23. It's been about a year and a bit, but we're sending some boots on the ground down there over the next few weeks, while there's a good weather window before the monsoon season to get in there, and we're going to be targeting 3 areas. The California zone is the primary gold target, but we found some potential to expand it to the east and to the north. And we found another interesting target called Brazil to the south. So we're going to be doing a field program there before the rainy season. So we'll have news coming out on that over the next few weeks and months. And then really once we start drilling, or as we move to the beginning of our drill program here at Tombstone, we'll have plenty of news out on that. So I think over the next, 60 days, you'll see a news release every week or two as we approach the start of drilling. And then we'll have updates, when the shallow drilling starts of every few holes, and we'll obviously keep the market up to date on the deep drilling, which should start around mid-July. So that'll be exciting as well.
I think it's pretty cool and quite fitting, actually, that Tombstone was at one point in the 1880s and 1890s the heart of American mining, gold and silver. A lot of the gold and silver that was pulled out of the ground during those decades came from this area. of Arizona. And it's kind of cool how, as we sort of enter a revitalization of mining in the US, you've got Aztec going hard at it this summer 2025 with a drill program that could be transformative for the Tombstone project. So very cool, and definitely rooting for you. Thanks, Simon.
Robert, thanks a lot. Really appreciate the time that you took with us today.
Cheers.